They weren't there. A Datura trip report by Blackbird, posted at EARBUDS.org March 4th, 2009. I'd heard about this drug while I was in school one day, and I decided to tell my sister, because I knew where I could get a lot of this so-called trumpet. My sister and I went and took one large seed pod and split it down the middle. The seeds were very ripe and brown in colour. I took the seeds and washed them down with water. I felt nothing at first, but then after approximately 30 to 40 minutes, I began to feel very flushed and drunk. I was beginning to talk about how much I loved everything and how great everything was. And then the hallucinations started. My sister left to the kitchen, but I could still see her in my peripheral vision, so I kept talking to her about life and how awesome it was. I continued for about 15 minutes before I looked in her direction to find that she had left. She came back into the room and was confused because I was talking to no one. I then asked her for some of the popcorn that she made and a glass of water. The popcorn was the most amazing experience I've had with food ever. It was so delicious I filled my body with a warm, glowing feeling, and the taste was so intense it made me tear in the eyes. And the water was so pure cold and refreshing, I felt like I was floating about 2 feet off my chair. Then, when I told her how good everything was, she asked me for some, and I looked down to see that there was no food or water to be found, and that I had hallucinated really badly. I then proceeded to go to my friend's house and I couldn't figure it out, but my legs kept giving out and I couldn't talk coherently. I remember getting to my friend's house and telling him I was really high, so he brought out a lot of hard drugs, and I left and went downtown. I started looking at birds and seeing them in my peripheral vision everywhere. Colours were very intense, and I felt very drunk. I went back home and tried to talk to my brother, but all that came out was garbled nothingness and he laughed at me. I started to mumble and rave, so I decided to go into my room. I look in the mirror and see my best friend sitting on the bed. I was very calm and excited to see her, so I talked to her for about an hour before I turned around to ask her opinion, and lo and behold, she wasn't there. I remember feeling the weirdest silence come over me, and I started to think that I didn't want to be so high anymore. The hallucinations lasted another 4 hours or so, and when I woke up I couldn't read small print or see properly for about 3 days. This stuff really messes up your eyes for a couple of days afterward. All in all, it's a very mind-blowing, calming experience that I actually really enjoyed. In fact, I did it 6 days straight at increasingly lower doses, until 2 kids in my school died from it, and 5 more were hospitalized. I researched it and found it was very toxic, so I never did it again. I do not recommend this for the weak of mind, but for me it was a great spiritual trip. Cheers. Journeying with Lady Datura, a Datura trip report by We Are God, posted at EARBUDS.org May 1st, 2023. In my neighbourhood, some neighbours had beautiful Datura plants growing near the sidewalks of the road. Every time I encounter Datura, it is a very alluring, dark lady attracting me, as if sexually, but of spirit instead, albeit with all the intensity and allure of sexual magnetism. The mysterious ethereal glow of the large white flowers blossoming in the cool autumn night. The heavenly citrus mystical aroma that permeates the environment around the plants, casting deep subconscious spells on unsuspecting passerby, and lulling them along the dream into a peaceful presence. But for me, it is very lucid and apparent that this spirit is very real and powerful. It blurs the usual lines of the dream in which we roam, calling us to question the very fabric of this reality, our sanity, and our certainty that what we perceive is real. When approaching the flowers, I look into where the petals reach out from its depths. I feel the intense attraction into the body of this being, and deep into the underworld of earth and the subconscious universal mind. I've harvested various plants of Datura on many occasions, every time with the utmost respect, reverence, and caution. Listen to her, or perish. I've made tea with seeds, roots, flowers, leaves, etc. I've smoked the flowers and leaves before. I've even made flying ointment from roots. The tea, though, was my introduction to her. I would drink the tea and explore my surroundings like a foolish child getting lost in the forest of the mind. Shadows and illusions appearing in the peripherals of my vision would approach closer. The world becomes more of a dream than before. Smoking the leaves and flowers of tobacco is actually amazing for stimulating breathing. By my early 20s, I had already studied and practiced a significant amount of shamanism, magic, healing, and plant medicine work. Datura entered my world again after years of absence. I read about witches' flying ointments. I made it using coconut oil and Datura root. I rubbed a very small amount on my forehead, laid down, and found my expanding awareness to be expanding very rapidly. There is a distinct feeling of flight, up out the body, expanding into parallel realms. I had many visions during this experience which were not necessarily pleasant. Actually, the beginning of the experience was rather scary. However, I actually transmute fear quite well, so all of the fear was converted into flight and expansion. Visions of spirits, magic, world leaders, demons, angels, heaven, hell, etc. I cannot recall much else, other than it was only one night and wasn't very overwhelming. It was overall quite nice actually, much better than making tea. Blessings. My best experience ever. A Datura trip report by Datura. Posted at EARBUDS.org, July 4th, 2001. Today is Tuesday, July the 3rd, 2001. Last Thursday was the best 19 hours of my life. I have read many different vaults on the mysterious plant Datura, which is a phantom in my hometown. My name is Chris, I'm 16 years old, and I live in Mesa, Arizona. I'm a very broke kid, and I'm always looking for a cheap high. I've found Datura on the internet, but it's hard to receive packages at my house. I live with my mom, who was very suspicious after she found my ketamine and buds. About a week ago, after an all-nighter, me and my friend Mike were cruising the town of Leahy when we noticed a small field of moonflowers. After all of my internet research, I recognised this to be the elusive Datura stramonium. We picked the ripened pods and took them home in the darkness of the next night. Then, on Thursday, me and my friend Mike drove to the ASU campus to meet a couple of his friends. We met up with this guy Dave, who has an off-campus apartment, around 11 AM. I then took the 2 teaspoons of the seeds while my friend Mike made a tea out of the nabbed leaves. I drank a tea made in 8 ounces of water and steeped with 2 leaves of Jimson weed. Mike did the same, and Dave rolled himself a joint that he smoked on the patio while we were busy. That cheap bastard wouldn't spot me a bowl. Anyway, after that, we were off. We walked down to Mill Avenue and kept on walking. About half an hour later, as we stood in Zia Records, I noticed something strange. Zia is usually pretty empty on a Thursday morning, but it seemed to me there was a crowd of people standing in the corner next to the new Weezer album display, staring at me. As I looked closer, I noticed it was my Spanish class from the year before. I said, "Hiya," to them, but they just sat there, staring at me. Then I noticed I had dropped my cigarette. I bent down to look for it, but I couldn't seem to find it anywhere. When I looked up, the crowd had gone. And then I noticed that I wasn't even smoking a cigarette. I didn't even smoke. I quit about 6 months ago. That is when a sudden cloud of surprise came over me. I looked around, and everything seemed normal. My friends came over to me, and we quickly left. The clerk had noticed my little conversation with the new Weezer display. Mike quickly became very despondent as we walked down Mill, and I began to notice that the blacktop road was kind of moving like a river. We walked, and from there, my memory actually kind of fades. I really can only remember little aspects of things from that day. I think that I lost track of Dave and Mike and sat down on the fountain by a coffee plantation. I don't remember it, but I think that I might have fallen in because I later noticed my socks and underwear were wet. There's little visions that I remember of walking down the street and running into old friends. It seemed that every time I looked down to find the cigarette I had dropped, my friends would disappear. This was a little frightening because it wasn't really the disappearing thing, it was that I could whisper, talk, and yell into my friends' faces, and they would just stare back at me not saying a word. I remember someone asking me to leave or the police would be notified of my behaviour. I cannot remember where, when, or what I was thrown out of. I believe that I started coming down somewhere around 2 AM. The next morning, because I was being talked to by a bum that was trying to inform me that I was sitting on his bench. He was yelling at me, but was just trying to conceive where I was at. I quickly got up and started walking. The The streets were fairly quiet, and I quickly became very frightened. I was having a lot of trouble trying to conceive the location and time of my existence. I soon became very despondent, and my thought process was just not working right. I decided that my best bet was to find a bench and sleep it off. I quickly found one in a place I simply didn't recognise. I'm almost positive that I fell asleep as soon as I hit the bench as well. I remember having vivid and lucid dreams of flying and feeling up this woman. When I woke up, I was laying on a green lawn being told to get my ass off the grounds of the Kappa something frat house by a stern-looking black person. As I was leaving, he told me it was 5:45 in the morning, and I felt almost back to normal now and quickly realised where I was on the ASU campus. I was only about 3 blocks from Dave's, so I decided to make that my destination. Dave wasn't happy that I woke him up, but he was happy to see me because he said he had not seen or heard from me or Mike since around 1 PM the previous day. We noticed Mike's car was out front, which scared me because I could only have imagined where he ended up. I wrote a very sloppy note, my eyes have trouble focusing right, and pinned it under his windshield wiper for him to find when he got back. I then went up to Dave's apartment to crash on his couch for a couple of hours. I woke around 11 AM to Mike knocking on the door, and he didn't speak at all, he just came in and laid on the carpet, and immediately fell asleep. I'd tell you his story, but he's going to submit it himself to EARBUDS one of these days, he says. We went back to sleep and woke up around 3 PM. I drove home to my mom, who was a little unhappy at my 2 days' absence. I was slightly depressed a few days after the experience, but I used small amounts of ketamine to help me out with that. The depression was no big problem, but it took my eyes about 3 days to return to normal. In summary, do not do Datura if you're an unstable person. Personally though, I loved it, and I've already gone down and picked up about another 50 seeds. I will definitely do Datura again, but next time I'll be sure to have a sitter, and I will probably skip on the tea next time. Please, read up on Datura before you decide to do it. Don't just stuff a cup of seeds in your mouth because, well, Datura is poisonous and you can die from it. If you're just feeling terrible, please go to the hospital. They will probably pump your stomach, which is no fun, but personally I would rather have my stomach pumped than die. And on a last note, always read up on things before you try them. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it can't hurt or kill you. Scary, but I liked it. A Datura trip report by Datura Fan 2012. Posted to earbud.org September 5th, 2018. I have 2 Datura Mattel, double purple, plants which I raised from seed. The first one is older than a year, the second one is about 8 months old. They both flowered throughout our spring and summer. I was quite disappointed to see the flowers blooming and then drop off entirely after a few days. Nothing was pollinating them, so I opted for manual hand pollination, and they all worked perfectly. I'm going on a bit, but I think I might have stumbled across something of importance: timing and dosage. From the younger tree I took 3 seed pods, 1 to my seed bank and the last 2 for consumption. I gave 1 pod to a friend because he wanted to grow them, and this is where it gets quite interesting. A few hours later there are people at my gate asking questions, etc. I suggested taking him to hospital for observation in case the drug was still picking up speed. Turns out that my friend gave the pods to a minor at 14-15 years old, and he had eaten them and was now tripping badly. From everything I heard, this was a textbook trip. Vanishing cigarettes, cell phone, talking Chinese, walking into things, mumbling, etc. The next day, my friend and the tripper graced me with their presence, and it gave me the opportunity to ask a lot of questions. It sounded like a scary but fun trip. The pod in question was the smallest and must have had about 12 to 18 seeds. I could hardly believe that so few seeds could have such an effect. He said he ate more than 12 but less than 20, chewed them fine, and swallowed. About 20 minutes later he said that the floors were rippling, and soon after that the trip got into full swing. I won't elaborate anymore, suffice to say that I was impressed. I simply had to try it myself. I used my last pod for the trip. The pod itself was still green in places, but this is exactly what I wanted: hydrated seeds. I broke open the pod and ended up with about 40 seeds, fresh and plump, even with the bits of white flesh that sometimes break off with the seed. I'm not sure if the white flesh played a part in this, but rather that the seeds were fresh and not dry. On a full stomach, I munched away on 10 seeds at 8:30 PM, swallowed, and then waited 20 minutes and played a bit on the PC. At 9 PM, nothing. At 10 PM I started feeling off balance, especially if I turn around fast and walk. I almost fell over a lot. I do smoke a lot of Sweet Mary Jane, but I don't recall ever feeling anything like this before. Definitely not the weed. Because it had taken so long for it to kick in, I actually nailed another 10. Bad mistake. I should have rather taken another 3 or 4 seeds. At 11 PM, I was definitely wobbling, like I was drunk on alcohol. I poured myself a glass of fresh cold water. The taste was horrible and actually made my throat burn. I made some coffee, but this also had a sour taste. I reckon I'll have some beers on hand for the next trip. I don't know. Alcohol and Datura coursing through my veins at the same time doesn't exactly sound like the best of ideas. At midnight, my trip was in full swing. I was seeing things, hearing things, walking into absolutely everything, bashing my toes at almost every corner. Ouch. I was picking up objects that only existed in my mind. It also seemed that my arms were shorter, requiring 2 or 3 attempts to reach an object in the real world. Man, this stuff actually works then. And from that point on, I actually time travelled until 3:30 AM. I do not remember a thing. At 3:30 AM, I must have made a lot of trouble in the house. My son and wife were following me around looking very angry. I had 3 experiments on the go concurrently. One in the bathroom, dissolving a bar of soap, the pill. Another in my workshop, don't know what the hell it was, teleporter I think. And one in the kitchen, making coffee with whatever I could find. I made a special egg milk which seemed to piss my wife off badly. I don't blame her, it was actually a mess. I told them that I was fine, but they didn't budge. I was incapable of holding a conversation because every word was such an effort, and my mouth wasn't actually working properly either, nor was my brain. I was tripping, hallucinating, talking to people who weren't there. The disappearing cigarette is a fact, an absolute fact. How many times I scoured the floor for the cigarette that had vanished from my fingers, I lost count. I also found it became very difficult to pee. My wife and son had a hard time convincing me that it was 3:30 AM and not 3:30 PM. Eventually, they opened a curtain and made me look outside. It was pitch black. I needed to go outside. I saw twinkling flashes of blue light coming from random points all around me. It was quite amazing. I knew they weren't real, but this was actually the best trip I'd ever had. It could have easily turned out ugly though. Caution. Caution. This stuff is dangerous. Definitely have a sitter if you're going to trip heavy. 20 to 30, maybe 40 seeds. My son, 18, told me everything just now. He was so worried about me. Told me that the thought I would never return as a normal person again. I got to all sorts of crap, apparently. Embarrassing, but wow, what a trip. My son actually filmed me during my time travel, and it's weird to watch myself. I was wasted, no denying that. I won't be doing it anytime soon again, mainly because I don't have any left. But this one is certainly going on my list as a do again, but with much more caution and respect. I apparently took another 10 at 2 AM and asked my son to take the rest away. I was still tripping mildly at 10 AM this morning. In our country, these seeds are commonly referred to as malpit, or in English, mad seeds. A perfect name for them, I think. Last words, thoroughly impressed. Advice, grow your own and make sure you pollinate by hand if need be. I was totally lucid. A Datura and cannabis trip report by Fredo, posted to EARBUDS.org February 16th, 2023. I am 16 and I am a responsible drug user. I've tried pot, alcohol, mushrooms, ketamine, hashish and PCP. When we discovered that Datura is growing in front of my friend's house, we decided to try it. We took a pod of the plant containing approximately 150 seeds and some leaves and flowers. We were going camping a week after, so we decided to try that in camping. No parents around. The first time we tried it, we made a tea with 30 seeds and a leaf. No effects whatsoever. Second try, we smoke a leaf in a joint with some tobacco. No effects either. The third try, we each took 10 seeds, and nothing. Fourth try, 20 seeds, nothing. Fifth try, 35 seeds. Now it worked. We were high on pot all the time during the camping, 24/7. So when the Datura high kicked in, we were high on pot too. I didn't feel it coming, it was pretty subtle. But then the evening passed a bit and I really didn't feel normal. I knew it was the Datura. What I'm going to say was said to me by my friends, because I don't remember well what happened. I know I was not feeling stupid in my head, just very, 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 very lost. I couldn't understand what people were saying. I always seemed to look for something. I'd get up, walk around, and then sit down again. I kept smoking invisible beedies. It's like a small cigarette, but it's not a cigarette. And thought I was always dropping them on the floor. I did a lot of stupid things during this trip. From the outside, I must have looked really stupid. I drank some soap thinking it was water. I burned a bag with a candle. I lost myself in the forest, fell on the floor, and thought there was a chair there. But I felt like I was totally lucid. I liked my trip, but I wouldn't do it alone. A new dream. A Datura and cannabis trip report by Flyby High. Posted at EARBUDS.org February 7th, 2023. This little experiment of mine worked out great for me. It was a Friday night and nothing was going on around town, and the apartment complex was dead. So I crumbled up some dried Jimson leaves I had from back home and smoked 2 bowls of this stuff through my roommate's and mine's water bong. It hit pretty smooth at first, then tasting the leaves was much more obvious after about the 3rd puff. At first nothing happened, so I chilled and put in Cake's Fashion Nugget and waited till 4:20 PM. I was pissing like a bandit in the time between smokes. At the magic time I smoked down 2 bowls of pot and chilled for a little bit, enjoying the high. At about 5 PM I broke up more Jimson weed and combined with the real weed and smoked a bowl. This sent me into a relaxing state. I closed my eyes and was consumed by the music that surrounded me. I could see many different patterns and designs in my imagination. It's hard to describe because I've forgotten a lot of the details. I remember talking out loud to nobody in particular, to anything that would listen. I remember looking into the bathroom mirror and combed my hair the opposite way and pretended to be that new person. That lasted for a while, then my mind began thinking about my future and what I had to do to make it turn out good. That night was very refreshing. I had many totally real dreams in which I'd wake up to pee and then fall asleep again with a new dream. This happened all night. The next morning, I didn't feel many side effects. I was a little lightheaded and seemed lost while I was doing my grocery shopping, but nothing noticeable. This experience was more like a quest than anything else. I'm definitely doing it again. I think one thing to note about these positive quote-unquote Datura experiences is that most of the people in this that described their trip as being a positive one really only enjoyed it because of the high that it gave them, often in tandem with something else like cannabis. And not really many of them seem to derive any spiritual insights or have a long-lasting positive effect on them. It was really more the euphoric elements of it, which is super bizarre, as deliriants by nature are not supposed to feel nice. And funnily enough, a few of these reports, the people in them described it as actually being quite a stupid or weird feeling experience with uncomfortable sensations and feeling like the IQ has been lowered by at least 100. But in a sense, a lot of these people actually related it to alcohol, so the numbing of the consciousness, the downgrade in their mind actually was something that they were seeking out as a high. So yeah, and also they was also very young, and when you're very young and you're getting into substances, you can often have this level of like, right, okay, I'm literally looking out for every single possible type of high and I want to experience it all, and the euphoria and enjoyment is of exploring all of these crazy substances, and even if it does go wrong, I actually enjoyed it because it gave me like this vision of something beyond myself and that, and it's like, they're not really positive substances, deliriants. I'm not denying the fact that, I mean, I've covered before, I did a video, it was like 2 uncommonly positive Datura experiences, and there was a bit more of a spiritual, mystical vibe to them where they seemed to commune with like spirits and etc, whilst it wasn't all-loving, all-encompassing sense of love, and there was like this sinister element to it. There was like at least some takeaway in regards to metaphysical insights into the nature of consciousness and immaterial beings and just stuff beyond like normal human perception. And that in a sense can help you expand your mind, but is it really worth taking a delirium to explore consciousness in this way when there's so many risks involved? Like many of the people said on here, they had a positive quote-unquote experience, they enjoyed it, not exactly positive, it was an enjoyable experience, but they oftentimes reminded the reader that this is toxic and it can kill you. Don't act like these people. You should really take care of your own consciousness and body and spirit, and just steer clear of stuff like deliriums. I mean, it goes without saying, but I really felt like I needed to add this commentary section, because at the end of the day, there might be someone who listens to these like, oh my god, these people had an enjoyable Datura experience, and this means I can rationalize Datura usage to myself. It's like, well, no, you're just gonna reap what you sow. You're gonna have a pretty uncomfortable experience, and there's a very small chance you might gain some like level of euphoria, of satisfaction from it, but at the cost of, well, you don't actually know what you're doing to your body really when you take these delirium drugs like Datura and DPH. It's probably even worse than people make out. So unfortunately, I have to repeat myself and just say, don't do it, because do you really want to suffer the very real consequences of it going wrong, which there's more of a chance of it going wrong than going right? And even if it does go right, all you're really doing is just basking in some like very shallow enjoyment. I think Datura use in shamanic settings is very real. I mean, it clearly is real. It's been used by various traditions, especially like Native Americans. But these are in a different ballpark to an average 16-year-old guy who just wants to get a bit messed up. There is a clear distinction between the intention going on there, and the Datura use in a shamanic setting is not just like, oh, well, I was walking into the walls and I felt a bit funky. Would probs do again? 2 thumbs up from me. The reality of using Datura in a shamanic setting is just, whoa, that's some really spooky, ethereal, mystical stuff that goes on there. It's not normal, it's not pleasant, and whilst that experience of directly witnessing something that defies all perception, seeing beings and spirits and talking to your friends that aren't actually there and directly experiencing something so unbelievably trippy, like beyond trippy, almost nightmarish levels of perception within your own waking state, it's probably not going to be very good for your psyche down the line. Shamanic people who use Datura and other sort of out there substances, like many of the plant substances that can produce these sort of nightmarish type experiences, they're doing it very differently to your average person on the glowing experiences section of EARBUDS. So yeah, just don't bother. There's much better things you can be doing with your time, like having a glass of milk and going to bed, and just basking in your sober consciousness, or using psychedelics wisely. So yeah, don't be doing Datura. Please just think very carefully about the consequences, and not just for you, but for other people as well, because you might be like, oh, well, I completely forgot everything that happened, but some people are going to have to clean up the mess during your period of unconsciousness, so yeah, not worth it. Let's just all chill and hold hands and listen to the soothing sounds of Jet Set Radio. Anyway, see you later, and hope you enjoyed this one.